So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our March 22nd, 4 o'clock session, Virtual Career Tuesday. And certainly our participating employer is Corbin Advisors. Joining us specifically today is Mark Hayes. Mark, thank you very much. Mark is Executive Vice President and Chief Client Officer of Corbin Advisors. He's active with pre-IPO, IPO, corporate, investment partnerships, private equity, and nonprofit organizations where he collaborates with board and C-suite leaders to develop strategy and transform their organizations domestically and internationally for sustained impact, operationally, financially, and culturally. Welcome, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd be happy if you would go ahead and start us off. Give us maybe a little bit of an overview about Corbin Advisors and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself that I didn't just share. How about that?
Sure. Fun fact, I was born in West Berlin when there was still a West Berlin, and then served with my family in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and in Asia. So the first time I actually came back to the States was for college. And so I have a very significant gap in my knowledge. When people reference TV shows that they saw as children, I completely don't have a touchstone for that, and I never had an opportunity to be a Boy Scout. So a little bit of a change there. So thank you. For Corbin, Corbin is a globally oriented advisory firm focused in the capital markets. Very specifically, we are the premier organization working with large global companies to help strategically communicate their strategies, their focuses around sustainable competitive advantages, and things like capital policy, with the net effect of that being those companies re-rate in the stock market, and those companies are able to realize their full value. Corbin was founded about 14 years ago in the perception study space, which is an insights-driven practice, which largely helps large corporate executives understand the way that shareholders view the company and allows them to communicate or pivot their strategies. Over the first 10 years, that business grew very significantly. And in year 10, we launched a second platform, which is a strategic communications platform, largely focused in investor days, non-deal roadshows, and special situations. One of the things we've appreciated is clients have asked us to do more and deepen our relationships. And so a few years ago, we launched an advisory business where we actually are on retainer with clients over a longer period of time, the longest duration, which has now been the first client that we've had. So it's terrific. Our clients have stayed. And more recently, we've launched a community impact business, which has two dimensions. There's an ESG dimension, which we can talk more about, and a nonprofit dimension. One of the things that Corbin is intently focused on is our community and the ability to bring corporate best practices to help solve really complex problems in the nonprofit space and help those organizations thrive and deliver services. One of the most important things we've done recently is we're working with an organization in Greater Hartford that is one of the leading social service organizations. They do things that would be familiar to many of us. They help those who are food insecure. They help those who are housing insecure, people who are moving back from things like a job loss, or in some cases, substance or mental health issues. So Corbin, I think, uniquely is positioned in the space as we have a corporate focus as well as a nonprofit focus. And I appreciate the opportunity to work on both of those sets of issues day to day. I think finally, Corbin roughly today has 75 folks, growing very quickly. We will probably add another 20, 30 over the next 12 months. And the secret to that success is largely client value. We have had an opportunity to add significant client value, and those clients have responded with asking us to do more. And so it's been a very natural development of the company in terms of approaching the 100 employee mark in the next couple of years.
So no small feat. For me personally, one of the things that is always fascinating to me, or specifically when I was reading information about Corbin Advisors, is really the nonprofit sector. And not only for you personally, you're heavily involved, right, within the local community and leadership and holding board positions there.
Mm.
So I think oftentimes students, when they're thinking about a financial advisor, oftentimes the thought process doesn't go to nonprofit.
Mhm.
Certainly, it goes into a different arena.
Mm.
But maybe you could talk a little bit in greater depth about what kind of positions you're talking about when you're talking about growing your organization and what those positions might look like.
Sure. Today we're actually hiring actively for between 10 to 12 new analysts to join the firm over the next 3 to 6 months. And those folks will largely be focused in one of our growth platforms. Those folks could either be focused in our insights practice, which largely drives market research and our perception study. They could be in our strategic communications practice, which is largely driving our investor day communications. They could be in our advisory practice, which is largely working with clients on a day-to-day basis around critical capital markets issues, or they could be in our ESG or our nonprofit businesses. We're hiring across all those platforms and are expecting those each to grow ratably over the coming 12 months.
Hmm. Amazing. And these are full-time positions that you're currently looking for.
Full-time positions, largely based in Farmington, Connecticut.
Okay.
One of the things that Corbin did about a year ago, Rebecca Corbin is the founder, and she made a very courageous decision during the pandemic. We had an opportunity to build a new headquarters, and we looked at that in February, right before the pandemic really hit with full force. And in April, Rebecca, who, if anybody has had an opportunity to see her on CBC, is incredibly dynamic. And we sat down to really answer the question, who did we want to be? And how did we want the company to perform at a time of real stress for our clients? And she actually made the decision at that time to proceed with our headquarters. She felt, and it turned out she was right, that our clients at any time in their life cycle, certainly the last 10 or 12 years, needed Corbin more than ever. And that it was going to be important that we had an area and a space where our employees could come, contribute together, and help our clients navigate what were some very, very challenging issues during the pandemic and still coming out of those, quite candidly. The headquarters in Farmington was built with an eye towards employees, 10,000 square feet in one of the largest standing buildings, actually in the United States. It has a historic significance. I think what's important about the design itself is that it was designed with an employee first mentality. It's a fun place to be, it's an engaging place to be, and it's a place that we really want people to be able to come and feel like they can contribute and be their best self.
Perfect. Yes, thank you. So give me a little bit of an idea of what the ideal candidate would look like for applying for any one of these open positions within your organization.
Sure. We just had the good fortune of actually welcoming somebody who would be familiar to many folks on this call, Ashley Brown, who is currently a senior at UConn. We liked her so much, we hired her before she graduated. Ashley's awesome. And so when I talk about why we hired Ashley, this is going to largely mirror the type of person that we're looking for. So the first really is somebody who has a really high degree of strategic intellectual functioning. You've got to be really bright to work on global capital markets issues. These are some of the most timely and critical and important issues that a company has. And so just fundamentally, you need to be able to understand and engage with that type of material. The second is you actually need to be able to deliver. And so you can execute. One of the hallmarks of Corbin is that we have some really smart people. We also have some really effective people, and that is a winning combination in any business. The third is you have to have a deep passion for client excellence, that when you get up in the morning, you're not defining the day about how was your day? How did your clients perform? Did your clients actually receive the value they were expecting from Corbin? Did we go above and beyond? There's nothing more satisfying, and I've never seen this before, and I've been in corporate life for 30 years. We get emails regular from our clients thanking us. It was a difficult time. Thank you for being there with us. That type of embeddedness is really important to our culture. Generally speaking, if you entered a room with any of our clients, you wouldn't know who the Corbin people were and who the client is. That's ultimately the type of relationship that we want, because then you're embedded with the client and you're a member of the team. And I feel really good about that. I think the fourth one is you really believe that being a colleague is one of the ultimate callings. And so I have an opportunity to work with some of the best and brightest minds in global capital markets. That is easily one of the humblest group of people that I know. Rebecca herself is brilliant, a founder in a space largely led by men when she founded the business and grown it to be a leader in global capital markets and herself a leading light in that space. She wouldn't say that, but I can say that. Thang To, whose 6-year anniversary is here today, is one of the global leaders in strategic communications and has worked on over 250 engagements with clients to help them re-rate the market's understanding and help those companies realize their value. I don't think I've met a nicer, more humble person than Thang To during my career. What's most remarkable about a day at Corbin, and I see this every day, I'm not surprised by it, but I continue to be deeply appreciative of the opportunity to be part of the company. And Ashley's actually had this experience recently. Ashley was working on something that we had that was actually quite complex for one of the global leaders in index funds. There were several other people on the team who were pencils down on a Friday. They were done with their work. The first thing those folks did was they didn't go home. They didn't think about what they were going to do. They all reached out to Ashley. What can we do? You're our new team member. What can we do to support you? How can we work together? I see that consistently day to day. It's an incredibly important quality to have coming to the company. And I think it's a really important thing that you have to want to believe. And then finally, I think being mission minded. Corbin isn't a job, it's a career and a lifestyle. And I think that's really important for people to understand. But more importantly, there's something bigger than Corbin. And one of the things that Rebecca did 2 years ago when she started the Corbin for Nonprofits was she wanted to acknowledge that we exist in our communities where we live and work and we come and contribute. But the community is a big place and we can play an important role. And I will share this with pride on behalf of all of my colleagues who participated. During the pandemic, all of us were aware that mental health was an extremely important issue. And Corbin recognized that too. We wanted to be part of that solution. And so we came together as a collective company and we raised the most amount of money in Connecticut through the NAMI Walk. That wasn't the 100,000 person company who was number one. That wasn't the 50,000 person that was number one. That was a deeply committed group of people in Farmington, Connecticut who thought that was an important issue and activated around it. The most important part of that story, and this reverts back to the comment I made about our clients, we posted about that with great pride on our LinkedIn page. The CEO of one of our clients, who is the leader in that sector, saw that post and actually donated alongside Corbin in order to actually magnify the impact of that. I mean, if that's not true partnership, I don't know what true partnership looks like. I was very proud that day that he had thought enough of the company to make a donation alongside of us. And the fact that we would come together and do that as well is important. Later today, and it may be happening while we're on the phone now, Corbin as an organization is donating, I think between the company and the employees have donated $26,000 to a variety of relief funds for Ukraine. And again, the $1 million number sounds good for a 100,000 person company. $25,000 is a very meaningful contribution for both the company and our employees, and we feel good about that too. So I think that's that orientation about we collectively can have an outsized impact in our communities and in the world is something that really, I have a colleague, Maddie, and she said the other day, part of the reason she likes coming to work is that she actually gets to do good every day. That's good on the corporate side, that's good on the ESG side, or good on the nonprofit side. And I think that's an important differentiator about the way we brought the platforms together.
I'm not really sure that I could follow up with any questions. I think that that's just such a fine example of partnership and community, what you just stated. So thank you for all of that work and thank you for everything that you do. Let's go back to a little bit when you first started about talking about Ashley and the true example of what a candidate looks like. And you talk about mission and commitment, but oftentimes individuals, students may have a hard time making that transfer and showing what those transferable skills are on a resume.
Mm-hmm.
How can they showcase that? At this particular point in time, some of them may be very, especially if they're applying for an internship, might not have the knowledge and the wherewithal of what it is that you're specifically looking for on a resume that would make that candidate a standout. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Sure. We try to look at the whole person, and that's actually something that's a real passion of mine. My father happened to have been an orphan, and so largely supported himself through college from a base of scholarships, summer jobs, jobs during the year. Frankly, I think at times any job he could get. That gave me, I think, an important insight to that everybody is bringing a different experience to college. Some people have the great benefit of families that can support them, and some people don't. So, I think we try to look at a very balanced perspective on who that whole person is and what are they bringing to the table. One of the great joys recently is we were able to welcome a new associate to the company. She actually had 4 jobs. She had a strong academic record. She had changed the community on her campus through her involvement in a number of activities, and she was widely viewed as a student leader. I thought that collective set of skills and demonstrated abilities was really something that was actually special. I know in the instance of Ashley, I believe that she's volunteered with helping international students actually prepare their taxes, which is very selfless. And I think that goes back to what we talked about before about being a good colleague. For me, fundamentally, being a good colleague is about starting with being kind. Incremental to that is being willing to support others when there's no benefit for you except that somebody else is successful and succeeds. So I think collectively, when you look across somebody, I think a strong academic record, but certainly balanced with that person's individual circumstances, somebody who has had a series of internships or work experiences that are a consistent way to demonstrate some of the things we talked about before in terms of execution and delivery, as well as being a good colleague and a collaborator. I think finally, somebody who really worked to change their community for the good. And then something I look for in particular is somebody who wanted to learn something really different. I was speaking to a candidate this morning, and they are a no joke core finance person. They also happen to have a real interest in Romance languages, which I thought was an incredibly interesting thing. And I said to them, talk to me a little bit about why you actually decided to focus in Romance languages. And she said, I wanted to broaden out the way that I viewed the world, and I wanted to learn about something different. So I think somebody who's a lifelong learner, and you can already see that early on, is somebody that I think is a highly attractive candidate and the way that you want to be portrayed. The other thing that I would say, and this is just more of a job hunting tip, I look at people's resume and then I immediately look at their LinkedIn. I want those to be the same. And I want somebody to actually care about their LinkedIn. That really is your personal brand. That doesn't mean you have to have, 1,000 followers or connections. What that means is that you've taken the time to look at your resume, look at your LinkedIn, make sure they're actually synchronous, and that your LinkedIn actually suggests that you're engaging with content that's relevant for our industry. I think that's always an extremely important thing to look for as well.
Perfect. That was great because that was going to be one of my next questions as to whether or not you actually utilize LinkedIn. So I appreciate that insight and that information.
Yeah, and I would just offer, Sue. I mean, for anybody who watches this or anybody here today, I would welcome folks to connect with me on LinkedIn. One of the things I do that I appreciate is I have a very broad array of connections. I learn from each one of those people through the content that they like, the content that they share, many of the posts that people develop and put up. I actually think that the diversity of thought that I have in my LinkedIn community is a real strength because many of those people think about the world in a fundamentally different way than I do. They have insights that I would not be able to access. I actually went to an international high school in Switzerland, and when many of those people post from Norway or Australia or Dubai or Singapore, it broadens and enriches my view of the way that they view the world in a business or professional context. So certainly anybody who is watching this, participating today, I would welcome you as a connection and looking forward to being connected.
I certainly appreciate that. And I hope that the students that are on now take advantage of that. So there you go. So let's move on to a little bit about what the interview process with Corbin Advisors looks like. Can you share with me a little bit about what that might look like for an entry-level position?
Sure. I mean, the initial step would be to meet with one of our talent leaders in what we would consider to be a normal interview setting, where that person would understand your interest about the company, and then you would make a joint decision about whether or not to move forward in the process. Following that, we actually have a slightly different process than I think other firms do. We ask people to engage with our leadership team because we want to make sure that people have a good understanding not only of who are going to be their day-to-day associates, who are they going to be working for ultimately within the firm. We want people to have a deep understanding of our culture and what we bring to the table as leaders. We want those folks to be able to describe to us what they would bring to the firm. Once those interviews have been concluded, very similar to what you would observe at a McKinsey, a Bain, a BCG, a leading private equity firm, we do have a couple of assessments that we put people through. Importantly, the assessment is not a yes or no environment as it relates to hiring. What it is it gives us more information to inform that decision, and in some cases, to develop very specific developmental plans for people when they join the firm. We've had people take one of the assessments, and you know, you're reviewing the results, and you're thinking, okay, this person's going to be outstanding here, but for their new leader, let's actually make sure they actually help the person develop here. And I think that's actually something very distinctive, which is those assessments are designed to identify ways that we can help enable people to have a highly successful career and enable that initial leader with a set of information about how to do that. And we take that very seriously. I would say relative to, we've looked at external benchmarks and we feel that our process is at a best in class tier. And when you think about Corbin as a firm, we're putting people in front of some of the world's most substantial companies with some of the most significant issues. So just to put a statistic out, we look at 100 people for every one person we hire. So we think the process does a pretty good job of identifying people that are, first of all, on culture for us, on strategy in terms of the profile we're looking for. And what I feel really good about is once people get to Corbin, they stay at Corbin. And we feel really good about that too. Introducing people to the firm and making sure that they're the right fit, really results in a very sustained relationship with that individual.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. So I just, again, to drill it back just a little bit further about
Sure.
the initial interview process. So no initial phone screen. The first interview would be in person.
We're trying to be sensitive to candidates today. So we offer in person. If for one reason or another, folks are not able to be there in person, we're certainly able to use Zoom. There are still people who, we're trying to be sensitive to in the context of the pandemic who have said, I'm still wary of travel. And so we've tried to be flexible in that context. But, I think one of the nice things about in person is you really get to shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, view the space. And actually, in one recent, and she would tell the story better than I would, but we had a candidate who said, Mark, I really want to come, but I really want to meet the team. We have a series of monthly lunches where the entire company comes together and we welcome our new associates. And I said, hey, listen, don't accept the offer. Come to the lunch and just meet everybody. So, she shows up and I said, yeah, just go introduce yourself and sit with people. And if at the end of that, you actually have the same impression that I've conveyed, why don't we sign your offer letter? And she said, okay. So she actually went over and introduced herself to several people. They had lunch together and we actually had the deal done before dessert. And so I do think there's I think the opportunity to meet people and really just talk to them is really important. And we're really trying to reintroduce the in-person engagement so that, talk to anybody at the company. It's fine. They'll tell you the same thing. And, that's really been, I think, a nice way to engage the broader team in helping recruit and engage folks as part of our process.
No, I appreciate that information. I think for those individuals that are listening at another point in time or even right now is that ultimately the obligation goes to the individual who is investigating or wanting to work within the organization to do a little bit of background and learn a little bit about your organization, because everyone has a different thought process and how they're proceeding with their interviews and what it is within the organization that is most meaningful. But I think that you've stated it very, very clearly to know that in person would be certainly beneficial for all partners, so everyone included.
I think so. And I also think, one of the things that different companies, Mary Barra had a great expression. And for folks that follow Mary Barra, who I think is just one of the great American business leaders today, there was one point where she was reviewing, the GM dress code. And it was apparently, multiple pages, 10, 12 pages. And she said, hey, why don't we dress for your day? Why don't we have that be the policy? And I just thought that was so smart. And I've really tried to think about, the way in which that's guided some of our decision making, which is, when you're in person, we deal with very serious people in very senior roles. If somebody is actually has looked at the company, looked at the client list, thought about our industry and sector, if they are in person and they've taken the time to, in whatever their own context is, come prepared in a professional way, that actually makes a difference. Because that tells us that when somebody's read about Corbin and sees that we do operate at the board level and at the C-suite level, that there's still a certain way that you conduct business with those clients, and that you're able to see whether or not somebody's taken the time to really think about how they would manifest. I mean, Ashley is a good example. I think Ashley, when Ashley watches this, she's gonna be like, "Gosh, Mark, why'd you talk so much about me? She's great." But I mean, I think we put Ashley on the phone with the CEO and their lead team of a Fortune 50 company on like day 3. Now, she killed it. She did a great job in walking through the work that she'd done, but she also showed up in a highly, highly professional way. And I think that was an important differentiator for her in the interview process. And it's important to our clients that they see that we have, we've got that level of respect for them, that we're showing up for our day with our clients.
Perfect. So we do have a question in the chat, and it essentially is, I may have missed this, but are you solely located in Farmington, or are there other office locations as well? So I think
That's a
we
great
answered
question.
that.
Yeah, we actually are located in 7 geographies. But let me talk a little bit about why we're focused in Farmington. I think that's an important question. Rebecca started her career at Thomson, which is based in New York, and has now been acquired by another company. But one of the things that she made a decision to do about 2 years ago when we were building up the new headquarters was, she essentially asked a very basic question, which is, why would we not want Wall Street jobs in Farmington, Connecticut? We know that we have a wonderful state with a number of amenities. We live and work here. Shouldn't we be looking to create employment opportunities for highly talented graduates, and frankly, early career, mid-career professionals who actually want to work in a Wall Street capacity in Central Connecticut? And so, while we certainly have made opportunistic hires in other geographies, Texas, Chicago, North Carolina, Florida, California, and the like, what we haven't done is lost our roots in that we actually believe in Connecticut. We believe in the future of Connecticut. And so when we have a decision about creating opportunities for people to live and work here, we wanted to do it. So it's not that we won't hire people outside of Connecticut, but we do what Rebecca and I call our home state strategy. We live and work here. We want to grow the state, and we want to create a jobs base for recent college graduates in particular that want to stay and thrive here. By the way, pro tip: rent is cheaper in Farmington than it is on the Upper East Side. So, we also think that's a pretty compelling value prop to, do global capital markets work at probably 1/4 of the price on the rent. So we feel pretty good about that too.
Excellent. Excellent. I certainly want to allow folks to ask any questions. Take yourself off mute if you'd prefer, or put it into chat. I want to provide that opportunity for folks to get out there. I'll stop talking for just one moment, and maybe
and can I share something, Sue?
Absolutely.
For me, this is really a kind of a collars down experience. And for folks that are familiar with that expression, there isn't a question I'm unwilling to answer. If you ask my colleagues, they might say there are a lot of questions I'm unable to answer, but that's a different problem. So I mean, more than happy to answer any question that folks have.
Excellent.
Well, I'll just jump in then. I took a look at your website, some of the positions available. Part of a lot of my experience in the past has been sort of the traditional application process. And in many ways, you're sort of, in most cases, to be honest, you're just sitting and waiting for a lot of the time. Is there any way that you or anyone in the HR or recruiting team could screen me right away? And then if it looks like, I already do have a position in mind, which I found, which I think I might be a fit for.
Mhm.
Um, if you guys agree or disagree, it'd be good to know the information, right away. And then I
Sure.
can say, okay, if you need me to apply, go through the process, yes, or if not, no, I could point you somewhere else. What would you think?
First of all, thank you for asking that. Why don't you connect with me on LinkedIn, and then I'll share my email back with you. If you shoot me your information, we can take a look at that later today, and I can be back to you tomorrow. Actually, one of the things where I've told the story because that first of all, thank you for that. The candidate experience is really important to us, and one of the things that we have, I have a quick story because this will be important for folks. We have somebody who's our marketing leader, Louisa Dessen, who's amazing. Um, I was actually on the phone with Louisa talking to her, and Rebecca and I were actually Zooming each other about Louisa. And I think I offered her the job on the phone. And first of all, thank you for saying that and pushing employers to be better. There is nothing more frustrating for a job candidate than an employer that, frankly, if you're interested in Corbin, we should be interested in you. And one of the things that we really focus on in our HR practices is engaging with our candidate pool very quickly. I probably get 50 or 60 inbound LinkedIn messages a week. Hey Mark, can you jump on the phone? Can you link me to the right person? Can you connect me? 100%. And many of those people have then followed us. Three of those people have applied for internships. I mean, here's the headline, right? If you treat people well, they're going to want to work for you. And I think that's a misunderstood, value today for many organizations. But it's right. Pleased to have you as a connection, and please do share that with me, and then we'll get that going right away. So thank you.
Of course. And if I might ask another question,
Sure.
are you allowed to give a little bit more details about the assessment process, what that might exactly entail?
Sure. Thank you for that. There are really two. The first really is the ability to understand information and analyze it in a way that would lead to the outcome that a client would be looking for. So I would type that as more of an analytical set of work. The second is because this is actually I think very important is the ability to understand the way in which information would be displayed visually for maximum impact. So just as an example, and I'm going to go a little financy here for a minute, but Suraj, you'll get the point. Um,
Mhm.
we have a client that 3 or 4 years ago, if you looked at a XY axis, would have been in the bottom left for an EV to revenue and then a percentage of sales growth. That client is now in the upper right hand and leading their sector. So we fundamentally helped that company re-rate, and now they're the leader in their sector in terms of their positioning on an EV to revenue and then percentage of growth. That was actually not intuitively obvious till you were able to actually look at the analytical output and then decide how you're going to display that. Because when you think about somebody who does really, really well in the ability to communicate the underlying strategy of a company to an investor, who, by the way, typically speaking, most global investors are looking at 120 to 130 opportunities in any given year and usually invest in 20. So you've got to be really tight about the way that you tell the story. And that person needs to be able to make an investment decision. So the ability to not just understand what those actual analytical numbers were and do the math, the ability to then answer the question, how would I most compellingly describe the company performance in a way that somebody would be willing to take an equity position? So it's actually both.
Okay. And is it online? Is it in person? Is it timed? Any sort of indication on that
Sure, it's online.
online? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because what we found is that we want to make it a convenient experience for the candidate. And so online has actually worked quite well.
Okay. And that's just based on, other companies and what they've done. And sometimes, you don't really know what you're getting into until you actually click the button. And so sometimes it's a lot more confusing than it should be. Sometimes it's glitchy. So you never know. Sometimes it's in person too. So
Yeah,
either way.
we actually have somebody who actually is your partner during that process. So we made a conscious decision not to build kind of a learning platform, and ask people to go through that. What we wanted to do was have it be a very positive person-to-person experience. And so there's somebody who participates in that process with you.
Okay, that's good.
Mark, thank you so much. This information, and Suraj, thank you for asking those questions because they're super poignant as other students move forward in these processes. Oftentimes, my words are, you don't know what you don't know. So if it is to just go ahead and push a button and then all of a sudden you realize it's timed, or you get timed out and you have to start again. So those are very helpful questions, Suraj. Thank you for
100%.
asking. And Mark, the only thing I can say is that it sounds like what a holistic interviewing process. And I appreciate that as somebody who works with students on a regular basis, and the questions that they ask, what should they be prepared for? It really sounds as though Corbin is really focused on obviously the success of everyone, but making sure that it's a meaningful experience. So I certainly appreciate that.
Sure. Can I add one other thing to that?
Of course.
One of the things that I would encourage folks to do is that if you don't know what you want to do, so as an example, I did not come out of college saying I really want to be in global capital markets. I came to this as more of a mid-career change. I would encourage you to read our LinkedIn, read our website, reach out to me. There are really interesting areas of the world that are not as obvious as, I'm going to go work at IBM. But I have found that the opportunity to work in advisory in a fast growing organization on really interesting and complex issues was something that I was actually not aware of. Rebecca, who's the founder, and I had been colleagues on the Hartford Symphony Orchestra board for a number of years. And then she and I talked about Corbin as a potential opportunity. And I'm so glad that I moved to Corbin. It's just been terrific. But I think my take home lesson there was that if you redial my career by 3 years, I was an executive in a large health insurance organization. I really had never thought about Corbin. I have actually never been more excited about my career than I am today. And so there always is that undiscovered opportunity. And so I would really encourage people to be opportunistic, because if you don't know, and actually one of the leading lights on our team today was somebody who actually didn't know they wanted to be in global capital markets. She applied and had just a terrific background. So I got on the phone with her and I said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "I'm really not sure, but here's what I do really well." And I said, "Okay, well, we actually need those things to do really well. And so why don't we agree that, you'll come on board for a year. You're going to like it or not. Well, we'd really love for you to contribute to the company." She's now one of the leading lights and is actually going to the IR Magazine Awards next week in New York as part of the team. So anyway, I think that's to say that not everybody needs a definitive answer coming out of undergrad about what you're going to be. But one of the things you can be is open to the unexpected and open to the opportunity that you may not know is out there for you.
Perfect. Well, thank you. One more, anyone else for any questions? Mark, any last things that we should think about that we didn't cover?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple, Sue. Thank you. The first is, what's the culture and why is that important? Every company has a culture, whether it's articulated or unarticulated. And I would say very simply, every culture is also a career choice and a lifestyle choice. One of the things that I would encourage folks to do is really think about what is the role of culture in your decision about where to bring your gifts and skills and contribute every day. The Corbin culture, I think, is reasonably unique in that we are an entrepreneurial company where the founder is still in place. She has a very powerful vision for the future. And I think we've all bought into that and are excited to continue to evolve in that direction. But I wouldn't understate the role of culture. I had the great fortune of working at Aetna when a man named Ron Williams was first the president and then the chairman and the CEO, who was easily one of the finest people I'll ever know, but was also one of the finest leaders. And working in that culture, I've actually never worked harder, but I've never taken more joy in working that hard because he was an incredible person and he built an incredible company. So I would really think about culture. I actually feel a lot about that way with Corbin. I don't feel like, oh, it's 5 o'clock, let's wrap it up. I feel like I really want to be with my colleagues and contributing to our clients. So That's not to say that Corbin's for everybody. People need to make a judgment about what's the culture that's right for them. But what I would say is I think that's an underappreciated dimension of where folks want to go. The other thing, just on a personal note, I would share that I think is important as folks are thinking about what they can do. As you're thinking about how you want to contribute and where you want to contribute, I think one of the things is you do have choices, and push your potential employer on the company and the opportunity that you want. We've job shaped for people that had skills. We actually hired somebody who was a recent master's from UConn, who's terrific, Rafia, who had an unbelievably strong set of data skills. And we've now shaped a role for her to contribute to our strategic analytics platform. So, I think one of the things that I've observed, at least from folks, is that so many people today have so many skills and gifts that they can bring to the workplace. Make sure that people recognize what those are and make sure that you're advocating for yourself.
Well, that's sage advice, advocating for ourselves. Definitely, most definitely. Well, in an effort to be respectful of everyone's time, I also just want to comment that, our other little chat notations, our information has been very helpful and refreshing and great advice. So thank you so much. But in an effort of time for everyone, I just want to make sure no last questions. Otherwise, a big thank you to Mark. This has been amazing and a great presentation. I certainly appreciate it, and we will all be in touch. Anyone, last questions?
I just wanted to tell Mark I never heard of job shaping before. I think that sounds fascinating.
Oh, thank you, Kathy.
Unique to Corbin?
One of the great gifts of being part of an organization that's entrepreneurial is that you can actually, in many cases, we actually don't hire for a job. We hire for somebody who has a skill and then answer the question, what job could they do that would contribute to the success of the firm? And so I think that's actually made us much more flexible. And in a couple of cases, and I don't think Rebecca would mind me sharing this, we've actually met people and we said, wow, that person is incredible. We're not actually sure what they're going to do, but we're growing so quickly, they're going to be able to do something. and we hire them, and it just turns out that they have been unbelievably successful. And so I think what's actually different, and I think, Shiraz, this gets back to your earlier point, which is, if you say, look, I'm only hiring for somebody with 0 to 2 years in core finance who had an internship at Goldman Sachs and did this, that's like 2 people. If you're a broader minded thinker and say, what are the opportunities ahead of us, and who are the people that might want to come and enjoy in that journey, and are there responsibilities we would add to that job in order to make it meatier for that person or a better fit for that person, or are there responsibilities that we might give then somebody else to create a developmental path for them? So Rebecca's actually going to come to the Women in Finance in the fall, which is going to be terrific. And I'm looking forward to being on campus on April 13th for the meeting then with Caitlin. But one of the most impressive things about Rebecca is that she thinks about the world in a world without constraints. So she's always pushing us to ask that question. Let's not hire for a job. Let's hire for a career and a cultural fit. And if that person has skills, we've got plenty of work to do. And some of our most successful hires have been about shaping a job around that person rather than trying to fit that person into the job.
That's wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
Well,
you.
folks, without further ado, I'm going to stop recording, and I appreciate everyone's time and energy. And Mark, certainly this has been a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much.
100%. Thanks so much for having me. Very much appreciated.